everyone, our names are Jenny and Kelsey, and we have constructed a creative project to review the Orestia by CLAS. We realize this storybook is written out of order presented in the trilogy, but it made more sense for us to make our project in chronological order. We also realize that we have included details that are not necessarily found in the Orestia, but they are found in the Greek mythology surrounding these characters, and we thought it pertinent to include in our own storybook. We would like to remind you that this is Greek tragedy, so some scenes may be physically or sexually explicit. For each two-page spread, we have provided an insert that looks at the parts and through a gender criticism lens, because this is the lens we chose to focus our papers. We hope you enjoy our storybook. We understand that many versions of these myths exist, so not all of our sources will agree with each other on the exact details. However, we do welcome constructive criticism in the comments below. We started this storybook with the story of the House of Tantalus. Tantalus starts the line of the major characters in this trilogy. Tantalus was a son of Zeus and often housed the guests for dinner. However, he was full of hubris, which is excessive pride, and he tried to trick the gods into eating human flesh by cooking his own son Pelops and serving it to the guests. Only Demeter ate any part of this, and she consumed his left shoulder. As punishment, he was killed and sentenced to eternity in Tartarus, where he has to spend the rest of his life in waist-deep water. As punishment, he was sentenced to eternity in Tartarus. He must forever spend eternity waist-deep in water that will disappear if he tries to drink, and underneath low-hanging fruit that will rise if he tries to eat it. Meanwhile, Pelops was resurrected by the goddess Fate. Pelops travels to Pisa, where he meets Hippodamia and wishes to obtain her hand in marriage. Unfortunately, in order to do so, he must beat her father in a chariot race. However, her father is known to cheat in these chariot races by killing the suitors. In order to secure a win, Pelops asked the king's charioteer to help him out. He would replace the brads with beeswax that would melt. In exchange for his help, he would receive half the kingdom and also Hippodamia's first night in bed. Unfortunately, Pelops curses his whole house because whenever he wins the chariot race, he does not fulfill his promise, and the charioteer curses him as he's falling off the cliff that Pelops pushes him from. Pelops and Hippodamia do end up getting married, and they have a son. They have many sons. But he also has a son outside of their marriage, and Hippodamia asks her sons to kill him. They do, and then they flee to avoid their father's wrath. They end up in Mycenae, where the king recognizes their royalty and welcomes them as close friends. When the king dies, he leaves the throne to his son, who charges off to war and temporarily puts Atreus in charge. This causes jealousy between the two brothers and forms the House of Atreus versus the House of Thyestes. Atreus, Thyestes. So Atreus, as king, promises to sacrifice his best sheep to Artemis. But when he tends to his flock, he notices a rare and special fleece that is golden. In order to not have to sacrifice this to Artemis, he gives it to his wife, Erope, who is supposed to hide it. Instead, as she is secretly having an affair with his brother Thyestes, She gives the sheep to him, and he proposes a deal with his brother that whosoever shall produce the sheep should become king. Because Atreus firmly believes that he could easily do this, he accepts the deal, but unfortunately Thyestes produces the sheep, and he has to relinquish his throne. Upset that he lost his throne, Atreus seeks out his great-grandfather Zeus. Zeus tells him, strike another deal with your brother. Tell him that if the sun travels back in the sky, you should be king again. So he goes to his brother, and his brother says, sure, of course, because he knows that no mortal can make this happen. Unfortunately for Thyestes, Zeus is no mortal and easily accomplishes this feat. He must relinquish his throne back to Atreus. Realizing at this point that his brother and wife were having an affair, he decides that he's going to get revenge. He does this by inviting his brother over for dinner and feeding him his own sons that he has cooked for him. Whenever he at the end of the meal, Atreus reveals to Thyestes the true nature of what he has eaten, and Thyestes is devastated. Afterwards, he is then banished from Mycenae by Atreus. Angry with his brother in this whole situation, Thyestes consults an oracle. The oracle tells him, if you impregnate your daughter, she will bear you a son that will take vengeance on your brother. So he rapes his daughter Pelopia, and she bears him a son. He leaves behind a sword and disappears. Pelopia is disgusted at the incest that brought this baby into the world. She abandons him in the wood with the sword that Thyestes left behind. Atreus discovers the child and then takes him in as his own son and raises him alongside his biological sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus. Later in life, Atreus learns of Thyestes' location and sends Aegisthus to go and kill him. When Aegisthus finds Thyestes, instead of killing him, Thyestes recognizes the sword that Aegisthus carries. He tells his son that he is his father, and Pelopia appears, and they all recall the events that brought Aegisthus into the world. Aegisthus now feels that he cannot kill his own father, but Pelopia is still so ashamed of the act that brought him into this world that she slits her own throat with the sword that Aegisthus carries. When Aegisthus returns to Atreus, he sees the blood on the sword and believes that he has completed the deed he was sent to do. Instead, however, Aegisthus kills Atreus and Thyestes regains control of Mycenae. When Thyestes is king again, both of his nephews, Agamemnon and Menelaus, are banished from Mycenae. They flee to Sparta, where the king decides to help them regain control of their land. After they kill Thyestes and regain control, he promises each of the brothers a wife to marry. He presents his two daughters, Clytemnestra and Menelaus, for each of the brothers. He doesn't present Menelaus, he presents him. Okay, I'm going to start. After they kill Thyestes, the king promises each of the brothers a wife. He presents both of his daughter, Clytemnestra and Helen, to the brothers. Helen marries Menelaus, and together they stay and rule over Sparta. Clytemnestra is meant to marry Agamemnon, but first he must kill her first husband. He does so, and depending on the version, he either kills or sells their first child. Then him Then Agamemnon and Clytemnestra get married and rule over Mycenae. They have 3 children together, Orestes, Iphigenia, and Electra. Orestes is sent at a young age to study abroad. For our first insert and look at gender criticism, we focused on the chariot race. This chariot race presents Hippodamia as a prize to be won and not as a person herself. Instead of being her own person, she is a property first by her father and then by all of her potential suitors. Even more problematic is, in exchange for a help from the king's charioteer, Hippodamia's virginity is offered. This signifies that her body can be used as a commodity to be traded and sold whenever a male figure in her life decides. On the flip side, we focused on both of the 2 women characters in this side of the story. First, Arope is treated solely as a lover in this play. She has no other apparent reason. She is only a lover to Thyestes and a wife to Atreus. But even more problematic is Pelopia's role in this story, because she is raped and she feels the guilt and shame of this rape instead of her father. The Greeks at this time would even more so focus on the fact that it was incest than the fact that it was rape, because they didn't believe that women had this kind of autonomy over their own bodies. This is a problematic look, and we can see the kind of society that the Greeks at the time were observing. Now we're going to move on to the Trojan War. This war begins the events that take place in the rest of the play. Helen, who is married to Menelaus, is kidnapped, which begins the Trojan War. Her kidnapper is Paris of Troy. He was prophesied as a baby to bring down the fall of Troy. This is fulfilled when he kidnaps Helen and starts the Trojan War. As ruler of Mycenae and as brother to Menelaus, Agamemnon is requested to lead the army. However, he unfortunately angered Artemis in a various different way, depending on different sources in the past. She withheld the winds so that the fleets could not sail. In order to appease the god, she requested that Agamemnon sacrifice his firstborn daughter. Agamemnon reluctantly agrees and he sacrifices her. However, Artemis secretly replaces her with an animal at the last second and spares her life. She is whisked away to Taurus to become the priestess of Artemis there. Upon hearing of the sacrifice, Clytemnestra becomes really angry. As Artemis releases the winds and allows Agamemnon to sail, she begins an affair with his cousin, Aegisthus. Clytemnestra has devised a series of lights that will signify the end of the Trojan War. When these lights go off, it will signify to the next light to go off, which will signify to the next one until eventually it can be seen by the watchmen in Mycenae that will tell Clytemnestra, and she will realize that the war has been won. The Trojan horse is one of the greatest, most well-known aspects of Greek mythology. The Greeks, in order to win the Trojan War, built a large wooden horse and hid inside of it and presented it to the Trojans. The Trojans bought this, pulled the horse inside their city, And in the middle of the night, the soldiers inside the horse snuck out, opened the gates. The Greeks came in and murdered the Trojans. The Trojan War was over. Agamemnon sails home. Helen and Menelaus are reunited. And Clytemnestra is reunited with her husband Agamemnon. Now we're moving on to the first play of the trilogy, Agamemnon. The play begins at the end of the war, when Clytemnestra's plot device of lights has been enacted. During this 10-year war, she has been having a secret affair with his cousin Aegisthus, and they have plotted to kill Agamemnon upon his return. At the beginning of the play, that we see the flare, and everyone realizes that Agamemnon is on his way. When he returns, he is greeted by his wife with a really long speech full of pretend loyalty and a purple carpet that is generally reserved for the gods alone. The chorus of this play is comprised of the elderly women. The chorus of this play is comprised of some of the elderly men in Mycenae. They are weary of Clytemnestra, and they become angry later in the play at Aegisthus, because they believe he has left the revenge to a woman. Upon his return home, Agamemnon has brought with him a kidnapped mistress, Cassandra. Cassandra is a prophet of Apollo. However, nobody believes any of her prophecies. She speaks about her upcoming and Agamemnon's upcoming deaths, but no one believes her, and she is forced to embrace her end. Cassandra's backstory started with Apollo. In order to receive his gift of prophecy, she promised herself sexually to him. However, after he gave her this gift, she denied him, and he was angry, so he cursed her so that no one would ever believe anything she had to say. Toward the end of the play, Clytemnestra draws a bath for Agamemnon, and in his ignorance, he totally believes that she is in love with him and is loyal to him. While in the bath, Clytemnestra kills her husband. After his death, Aegisthus addresses the chorus and explains and tries to justify their actions. The chorus is angry, but Clytemnestra is able to calm people down. For the second gender criticism, we focused on two more aspects. The first one is Helen of Troy. Helen is another person in this play that is treated like property. Her sole worth in this play is based on her beauty. Neither Menelaus nor Paris of Troy say anything other than respect her for anything other than her looks. Unfortunately, this pushes the idea that women's value is only by their attractiveness to men. This is really, really problematic because it forces women to create this self-image of themselves and other women and how they are supposed to be treated in society. We also looked at Cassandra and Clytemnestra. Cassandra, again, is regarded as crazy or silly, and she's not really treated like anything but a sex slave for Agamemnon. He doesn't value her, and he doesn't really value his wife either. The characterization of Clytemnestra, despite her being a villain in this particular play, is a stronger role than we've seen for other women. She's the one that takes action. She's the one that avenges death. She's the one that murders her husband. However, the court seems very angry that it was a woman that did this. They believe that it had to be a man. Despite the fact that nobody should be killing anybody, it's problematic to say that there are such strict gender roles. The second play in this trilogy is Libation Bearers, or Choephori. The play begins with Clytemnestra's and Agamemnon's son Orestes returning. He has been ordained by Apollo to avenge his father's death and kill his mother and Aegisthus. He and his friend Pylades travel to his father's grave, and he leaves a lock of hair. However, they hear footsteps approaching and they return to hide. Electra approaches with the chorus, and they bring libations on Clytemnestra's behalf. The reason that Clytemnestra is sending these libations is because she's had a nightmare. She's had a nightmare that she is breastfeeding a snake, and that snake, along with breast milk, suckles blood. The oracle advises her to appease her dead husband, Agamemnon. Electra notices the lock of hair that Orestes has left and the footsteps that resemble her own. She soon realizes that her brother Orestes had been there recently and is probably still in the vicinity. He appears, and she feels her prayers have been answered. He is there to seek a revenge for their father. He devises a plot to enter the palace. He will go to the palace, knock on the door, and pretend to be a traveler from a great land. Here, he will tell his mother that he has news of her son's death. He pretends to be a traveler speaking of his own death. Clytemnestra is obviously upset, but so is the old nurse that used to nurse Orestes. And the chorus leader must calm her down and send her away to bring Aegisthus to the events. However, they convince her to make sure Aegisthus comes without guards, and he does. He is swiftly killed by Orestes. Soon, Orestes confronts his own mother with a sword, but her words cause him to hesitate. He feels bad already because he doesn't know that he can kill his own mother. Pylades, his friend, reminds him that Apollo ordered him to do so and that he has to, or that him and all his future generations will suffer great diseases. He's convinced that he must. And eventually, he kills his mother. From her dead body, the Furies arise, and they seek to punish Orestes for killing his own blood. However, Apollo lulls them to sleep, and Orestes flees to Athens. The third and final play of this trilogy is Eumenides. Eumenides starts with the oracle preparing to give her prophecies, but running out of the temple because she is afraid. She has seen the Furies chasing Orestes. After Apollo has lulled them to sleep, Clytemnestra's ghost appears and awakes them. They are furious with Apollo because they feel like he has prevented them from seeking their true purpose, Orestes. They chase him all the way to Athens, but Athena appears and she proposes a truce. Hey, how about we settle this in court? The Furies and Orestes decide, okay, why not? Let's give this a shot. And they decide that they will establish Arogapus, the first court of law. The trial begins with Apollo announcing that he will serve as the defense attorney. He tries several defenses, and most of them do not work. First, he argues that... Sorry, hold on. You can cut this part out, right? First, she argues that Apollo argues that Orestes had to kill his mother because she killed his father and he had to avenge his own death. And if the Furies are after Orestes, why were they not after Clytemnestra? And they rebuke, she did not kill someone of her own blood. He did. Then he argues that Zeus would have ordained the same thing because he holds the death of the father higher than the death of the mother, but the Furies say, that's funny for you to say that Zeus would feel that way, since he himself killed his own father. Lastly, he says, oh, well, you know what? Mothers aren't the real parents, only fathers are, and Athena is living proof of this. Athena has no mother. They argue back and forth, but eventually the argument comes down to the fact that no mother is necessary, that it is only the father, and the mother is rather a seed for the baby to grow. The vote is cast. Athena casts her vote for Orestes. The vote is tied, but Orestes goes free. The Furies are now angry with both of the younger gods, and Athena must use her diplomatic skills to provide them with such graces that they decide to become the Eumenides, which means the benign ones. Instead of punishing, they now reward people for better behavior. Orestes, who is now free from harm, travels with his friend Pylades again. He ends up in Taurus, where he is captured and prepared to be sacrificed to the gods. All strangers, but especially Greek strangers, suffer this fate here. However, here he discovers his sister Iphigenia, who was supposed to be sacrificed by Agamemnon, has not truly been sacrificed. They talk, she learns more about what happened in her family line, and then they decide that they need to escape because obviously they don't want to die. The two escape, and she ends up in Baran, Attica, where she becomes the priestess of Artemis there. For our third and final insert on gender criticism, we have focused on two more aspects of this trilogy. First, we see Electra, who is quite opposite of her mother. Her mother, who took it upon herself to avenge the death of her daughter, or the perceived death of her daughter anyway, was strong in her character, but Electra feels that as a woman, she doesn't have the same opportunity to do this. She must wait for her brother to come in, because he's a man, to enact the vengeance for them. Obviously, the final argument in Eumenides, where they decide that the mother figure is not important, is a very sexist statement. In fact, it's contradictory because a lot of times women are supposed to be solely the homemakers or solely the child raisers. That's all that they're supposed to do. So it's interesting that they even take away that small role that they gave women in the first place and say that they're not really important for that either. That's really problematic for a society. We've also included our works cited list. So we hope that you take a minute to review these sources and give us your thoughts on what you felt about this book. Thank you so much for watching. We really enjoyed making this, and we hope you enjoyed watching it.